Hey guys, it's Steve Braconi, team leader of Team Braconi. Super excited to have Alfredo Vastola, my team manager, back with us, and Ray Lavecchio from Sherlock Home Inspectors with us. We're going to talk a little bit about home inspections today and give you some tips and tricks. We are live, so if anyone has any comments, questions, please send them straight over to us, and we'll try to do our best to answer those. Welcome, Ray, to the show.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Great. Just want to get a little bit of a background from you and kind of how you got into the industry with the home inspection. You've built an extremely successful company over the course of, I think, 35 years. And our team utilizes you nearly exclusively just because of the experience we've had with you has been so positive, extremely transparent, extremely thorough with your reports. Timing is great. You get the reports back very timely. You have a lot of support in your office. You have a lot of guys and girls that work for you behind the scenes and other inspectors that work under you. So a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into the industry and what your company is doing currently.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve. Basically, I've had some construction and engineering background, which I found the home inspection business was a walk-in. I found it quite easy, rather comfortable. In each house that we do, each person that we deal with is different, so it's not a boring humdrum field. It's something that we look forward to. And the fellows that we have, I've got 5 inspectors, a full office staff. So we're well versed into what goes on during a home inspection, both out in the field and also in the office itself. So really, any question will not go unanswered to a client before, during, and after the inspection. I know you had brought up pre-listing inspections, which I find to be quite helpful and rewarding for both the agent and the seller. It avoids any unpleasant surprises. It also encourages them as to what defects and repairs that need to be addressed, especially today. The bidding wars, that what's going on, people paying X amount of dollars over list price. We always get hit with the question, well, I only want structural and environmental only. Well, that's all well and good. What happens to the plumbing, the heating, the air conditioning,
Exactly.
the termites, the radon, we can go on and on. So we try to give them an education, both for the seller and the agent, on a pre-listing inspection.
With our team and your team, there's a lot of parallels there where we're working in the best interest of our clients, and we kind of have to shift with the way that we present things. In other words, if I'm representing a buyer who maybe is an investor who's purchased and sold 30, 40, 50 properties, I'm going to approach that client, that file, a lot differently than a first-time buyer. And I see that you do the same thing with the inspections, because I've physically been there when you've done a home inspection for someone that's extremely savvy and how you provide that home inspection and the information you relay to them on site versus a first-time buyer, which I think is fantastic, and your ability to pivot, which appeases myself as the real estate agent, but also, more importantly, the client and kind of what their needs might be.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Especially today, we have a lot of New York City people coming into Jersey where they don't know a boiler from an air conditioning unit. And basically, we try to give them, first of all, to make them feel comfortable. It's a very emotional and stressful job that you have as well as us. But we do try to make them feel comfortable, and we give them a little bit of insight without overwhelming them getting into a house. We'll walk them through the structure, the electric, the plumbing, the heating, the air conditioning, what to do, what not to do, preventive maintenance, what to expect when you close. And there's a lot of people that they really don't understand during a home inspection. We really can't pick up latent defects.
Well, in fairness to you as well, there have been deals that you called me and said, this is bad. This is a bad situation.
Yeah.
And we're very transparent, and we've terminated those transactions. But there's other deals where we find maybe even a multitude of items that are very correctable. You could repair them, you can ask for credits. And I think your ability and your team's ability to explain those items, because you don't want a client to ultimately lose out on a great home because there's smaller items that we could deal with along the way. So I have seen that difference with maybe a less versed or less experienced inspector, just someone that approaches the business differently. Well, they almost try to flex their muscles and they terminate deals maybe unnecessarily. Right. There's a reason to terminate a deal. Absolutely. If it's structural, there's major issues. And ultimately the buyer has to be aware of those things. And you've done that very transparent and very detailed. But the manner in which you seem to report those things and describe those things to someone can appease them, because ultimately that buyer is there typically because they love the home. They want the home. So you're giving them solutions and not trying to kill the deal on them unless it's absolutely necessary. And either way, you're going to give them that option.
Yeah. Well, getting back to killing the deal, a lot of people, they really don't understand what the purpose, why we're there. Some houses, you're not really killing the deal. The house commits suicide. I mean, the roof is
100%
leaking, structural defects, there's termites, there's mold, there's asbestos. Could be a number of
And
things.
no one wants that for their client. We don't want it. You don't want it.
No.
So at that point, it's best to walk away.
Right. But there's ways of communicating with the prospective buyer, without scaring them.
Correct.
There's a lot of fellows out there, and being that I am the president of the New Jersey Association of Licensed and Home Inspectors, I see a lot that goes on out there, and there's just fellows out there that are alarmists, and they just kill the deal. I take that as inexperience. I take it as a lot of these inspectors are in a house 6, 7, 8 hours. There's no reason for that if you know what you're looking at, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you seen the industry change? Not only in the 35 years you've been in the business, but even I've seen a lot of shifts and changes with how agents approach the business and the industry itself, even within the last decade, even within the last 10 years. I've been doing it 20, not 35. But what have you seen throughout the last 35, but also specifically within the last 10 years? Have you seen some changes that you see different with either mechanics, or the way that reports are being generated, or the way that the industry, as far as the home inspection itself, is done?
Yeah, I mean, years ago, everybody was using checklist, boilerplate type reports, which were really not effective, and they really weren't in depth as to what it is now. As far as the changes, it's more environmental today than it is mechanical, meaning they want you to test for asbestos. They want you to test for radon. They want you to look for buried oil tanks. They want to do sewer scans. I mean, you can go on and on and on. I'm not a big advocate of having all those services, which we call ancillary systems, up front. When a client calls us, we try to give them a little bit of an idea of what's going to go on. And I tell them, get through the preliminary process first, meaning the home inspection. At the time of the home inspection, we're going to recommend, we're really like general practitioners. We're going to go in there and we'll say, well, look, we found some asbestos on the steam pipes in the basement. I recommend to have it removed. We found mold up in the attic. I always get the standard question is, well, is it good mold or bad mold? And I always tell them, look, the only time I've ever seen good mold is if you're making penicillin and cheese. Other than that, just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Radon testing, I think, is important. Certainly the termite certification, if they're getting a mortgage, they're going to need that as well. And that's for any kind of wood destroying insect, carpenter ants, carpenter bees, or termites. So I tell them, get through the preliminary process first, and then at that point, we can make recommendations accordingly. There's been a lot of times where we've been on an inspection, and people said, I'm ordering this, and this. Well, okay, you're going to do that, but now I found structural defects in the basement. We're going to have to get a structural engineer in. Well, first going to say is, well, I'm going to walk away from the deal. Well, here, now you spent X amount of money on sewer scans, oil tank sweeps,
it's all unnecessary,
mold. What are you doing?
So if we back up one step and someone were to call your office and schedule a home inspection, what would be the process? So they call in, and ultimately, I would say most of your business, I would have to believe, being the business this long and having a reputation, would be word of mouth or relationships or referrals. So they call in and they schedule the home inspection. What can they expect from the process, from the moment that they make that phone call to the moment they meet you on site and going through the home and then receiving the report back? a few days later? Well, how does that process look? Just a general overview.
Well, basically, the client would call and they would get a hold of. We had 2 girls in the office. They would handle all the calls and the scheduling. They would go over all the areas that need to be addressed, what we're going to be doing. Naturally, we're going to want to find out the size of the home, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, is it vacant, is it occupied, is there any major concerns that you want us to spend time on? Then at that point, they will schedule the inspection. And, being they have 5 inspectors, we always have them on a Ray only, Anthony only, Tom only, Chris only. So we try to accommodate them as best as possible. And I tell them, say, look, I realize that the realtor recommended us, but I want you to understand you're our client. We're there to protect you and nobody else.
Absolutely.
So I try to give them a little bit of comfort anyway. And then we'll meet them on site and then we'll walk them through the process. Some fellows like to start on the outside, some on the inside, from the attic, some start from the basement. And I always want the buyers to accompany the inspector. I think it's very important.
Do you typically stop through the process to regroup and kind of go over what you found? For example, if you did the basement, and you're going to find issues pretty much in any basement, they may be minor. Would you stop at that point to review those items at that point, or does it depend on the client? How do you review the report as you're going, or do you typically wait till the end of the session?
I like to go over each detail, especially in the basement. That's really where the nuts and bolts are. And I like doing that for the simple reason. The first thing I would say is, look, this is the most important valve in the house, your main water shutoff.
Yeah.
If there's a leak or a plumbing situation, this is where you're going to shut the system off and to call a plumber. And I like to go over all those areas, especially safety factors. If there's open wiring in the basement, we want to make sure that it gets enclosed. If there is any kind of water intrusion, we want to explain to them where the water possibly could be coming from. If there's a mold condition because of the water intrusion, we'll take the next step and tell them, you should get a mold expert in here to find out how far it's traveled. But yes, we like to go through each and every area as much as possible. But I find that when we spend the time in the basement, that's pretty much what they're interested in. After that, I'll get.
It's literally the foundation.
Yeah.
It's the lifeblood of the house.
Speech, right?
Exactly.
If you don't build on something solid, you have a problem.
Exactly. But it seems like we lose them after the basement, and they want to say, "Do you have a tape that I can measure rooms with?" And they disappear, which is okay. And I always summarize at the end, or anything that we went over of your concerns, and then I'll make my recommendations accordingly.
Yeah. So that's important because then when they get the report, and we mention this to our clients all the time, is it reads like, a novel sometimes.
Right.
And a lot of it's maintenance, right? So how do you go about explaining what they're about to receive and not to have them panic because a new buyer concerned about every bit and piece of the house is going to look at it and say, I can't deal with this. It's too much, right? So how do you go about approaching that conversation as well?
Well, it is. Once they get the report, it is a little overwhelming, and that's also part of where the girls in the office will explain to them. There are areas of the report that, according to New Jersey standards of practice, that we must put in the report. Right. Disclosing what areas we're going to inspect, what areas we're not allowed to. Mm-hmm. But again, once they do get the report, we have a full office staff that will be able to go over the report in detail and make recommendations accordingly. The standard question with the clients are how much.
Yep. I have to interrupt for a second too, because you're so good and your staff is so good about hopping back on the phone, which to me is so important.
It's rare.
And I was going to mention this to Alfredo and have him attest to this, which you could, Alfredo. But if I have an issue with the report in the sense that it reads a certain way and I know what you meant, but the client maybe has a small concern and I know it's going to be alleviated as soon as I speak to you because I know exactly what you meant by it because I've seen hundreds of these, not one.
Right.
You always make yourself available. Your staff's always available. Whoever was on site who helped write that report and generate that report, the inspector, is always available. And Alfredo can attest to that because you're able to get back on the phone and you're able to have that conversation, not only just to alleviate the concern, like I said, but to explain the situation, to make them comfortable, at least at minimal, to give clarity.
Yeah. And it happened recently. I think it was one of our deals in, I don't remember the town. It was up north. And the house was not in good condition at all. I talked to Ray about it, and just confirmed what we were reading on the report. And it was a situation where it's best for the client to walk away. And that's the important part of a lot of what we're talking about today is Ray and his staff and his team. As you mentioned earlier, when you make that initial contact and explain what should be done at that initial inspection, it's not here's all of our services, pay for it. No, that of course you can easily do that and you can make more money,
Right.
but it's all about the client. Let's go to the house and then we can focus on the a la carte or you however you I forgot the phrase that you used.
Ancillary
Ancillary.
features,
Again, that's
yeah.
going back to the parallels we have with our team and your team.
Mhm.
Is you do act in the best interest of the client. And again, I don't believe that all inspectors do. And any industry is the same, in my opinion. No different than realtors, no different than inspectors, no different than mortgage reps or any other industry. You have what I would consider to be poor inspectors, average to good inspectors, and great inspectors. And to become a great inspector, it's not one category. There's a number of things that I feel you have to do as a top producing realtor. And I see a lot of inspections and I deal with a lot of inspectors to get to that caliber.
Yeah. We always said we have two ingredients that make a good inspector. Even when I do a lot of these seminars with our group, it's 50% knowledge and 50% personality. Yeah. I've had fellows that were in the construction trade said, I passed the exam and I'd like to become an inspector. And could I come in for an interview? Well, they did. And I would show them a steam boiler. They didn't know a steam boiler from a Volkswagen, but they were good, with framing. And they were good with decks.
Yeah.
And it was, so you really got to be
Yeah.
well versed in all the mechanics of the house.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to explain to them in a way that you're not, I don't want to say blowing the deal, but it's an emotional event that you want to try to keep as calm as possible.
You have to have a balanced a set of skills.
Yeah,
for sure.
And again, I always invite the clients to give us a call. We'll go over the report. There's any questions at all, they always can reach myself or my staff.
That's for
They'll
sure.
never get an answering machine, and that'll go 7 days a week, unfortunately. But that's the nature of the business.
Kind of leads into the next question I had, which we work out at the same gym. You keep in great shape, and I've talked about that on the podcast. I believe that helps the mentality and physically and mentally, and you always have energy, always vibrant. When we were at the gym, I had a text message come in from a friend of mine who lives in town, and he was saying that he's kind of burning out from his job and he wants to be a home inspector. And I said, today on the podcast, I have best home inspector in the state of New Jersey coming, and he owns a company and blah, blah. What would you say to someone who's thinking about getting into the industry? Both, what would they have to do as far as credentials with state licensure and stuff like that, but also practicality? What would be your advice to someone who's thinking about getting into the industry?
Well, hopefully they have some sort of a construction background where they know, the parameters of a home. That makes it a lot easier. And then they would go into a school where they receive their credits, and then they would be mentoring with a licensed home inspector and then take the state exam. But I would have them go out several times with myself and show them when you have situations where you're not going to make everybody happy. There's always going to be somebody that's going to.
Sounds familiar.
So we try to do our best, but yeah, and then once they pass the exam, then we would take them on. Yeah,
and when you take them on, what does that entail?
They would accompany us at the inspections, and see.
Like a mentorship program. Does that last a certain period of time where they have to be under someone that's?
Yeah, I would probably say it probably takes at least 18 months.
Okay.
Good 18 months. And I would know right away if they're going to make it or not.
Right.
Sure. I've had engineers that could build a Brooklyn Bridge in their sleep, but that a personality like that desk.
Right.
The realtor would call me, Ray, you sent me a mute.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to create the relationship with the client.
Yeah.
They got to be feeling comfortable. Again, it's the biggest asset.
It is.
That they're buying.
They're scared. They're scared
stiff.
Right? And then, with pricing, I get, well, could you do better on the prices? Look, I feel we're right in there.
Yeah.
You're not buying a pair of shoes. It's a house.
No, you get what you pay for.
Is $50 going to make a break?
Yeah, that's a tough position for your industry to be in because, with us, I mean, we're facilitating locating a property for them or selling a property for them. And it's a big asset. So now they're looking for however different avenues they could save money. And you're 100% right. I mean, you guys are not the cheapest but you're also not the most expensive,
Mhm.
and you're right where you should be, and you have to, you know, you have to pay to get quality service.
Yeah, again, it's just very difficult to work or deal with, compete rather with a one-man operation.
Not only that, you picked up so many things through the course of years with my team that I know I'm like, there's not another inspector I know, and I'm not just saying this, that would have picked that up. You went a little deeper. You looked at, you had the knowledge, you had the expertise, and you were able to isolate or find an issue that probably saved them X amount of money over the course of the next years and got it fixed up front before the closing.
Right,
So that
right.
50 or 100 or $200 that you might be extra, and maybe you are, maybe you're not, that paid itself
Yeah.
over and over again through dividends.
It's
For
hard
sure.
to get over that point to explain to them when they're in the
I see
preliminary
it, so I know.
process, you know.
Right.
But you know what? Look, a lot of times they'll say, look, the realtor will call and say, could you help this fella out? He's a vet or a first responder. Yeah, certainly we would help them as much as we can. You know,
When I see you on site, you seem very happy, like you like what you're doing.
No, I love it.
Doing something 35 years, I guess you better be, or you're really crazy.
Yeah.
But you really do seem generally happy. What would you say you like most about the industry, about your job, about your company?
Each house is different. Each buyer is different.
That's for sure.
You know, and each seller is different. So
You always walk into different situations.
Exactly. You never get into
A rut.
a mundane,
Yeah.
plain. Here again, it looks like a monopoly set. Each house,
Yeah,
it's not.
I
It's
agree.
not that way. And I get fun. I love the people that we work with.
It's like a challenge each time
it
you
is.
step into the house.
It is, and it's rewarding when I
Yeah.
hear, you did my brother's house, my sister's house. You did a good job.
Yeah.
That's what we're calling you. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't do any marketing at all.
Yeah.
It's like 90% of my business is all referrals.
Mhm.
Thank God everything has worked so
Yeah.
far. So
Is there a portion of the physical process that happens to be your favorite or least favorite? Like when you're doing an inspection, do you like doing the reporting? Do you not like doing the reporting? Do you like meeting the client and talking with them? Do you like the actually finding some of the issues and pride yourself in coming up and disclosing those things?
probably all of the above. I mean, in August, I really am not too fond of going in an attic, the 120
Especially
degrees.
in August.
Yeah. Or
Crawl
a
spaces
crawl
and
space.
things.
You know what I'm not fond of? Being there and you saying, come on up, I want to show you
Right,
something.
Sure,
right,
exactly.
right.
What's it like working with your son?
Well, Anthony's probably got more referrals than anybody out there. He picked it up really quick. Out of not just because he's my son. I mean, he's got construction background as well, but the people love him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got more referrals than I've ever seen, and he likes it. It's challenging for him as well.
Well, I noticed this from him because I mean the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And it's kind of what Steve was saying. The way you talk to clients is very calm and mellow.
They're similar. They have a very similar
Yeah.
style and approach.
And that puts them at ease. And it's like we were talking about. You can be an expert and be very good at that aspect, but if you can't talk to the client as well, you're going to have issues.
You lose them. You
Yeah.
lose them, and it's not lack of trust. It's just that they don't feel comfortable. And again, this is probably the most largest investment they can be making of a lifetime.
On that note, when someone's looking to retain an inspector and maybe they don't have a realtor that recommended someone, what would you advise them versus just going online and trying to search
Right.
someone? Is there something that you would recommend a client to ultimately look to retain that inspector?
I would look for the credentials. That's the biggest thing, and the following.
As far as credentials, explain that. What do you mean by credentials?
I mean, is this particular inspector, does he have carpentry skills, mechanical skills, plumbing skills? What's his strength?
So a background of.
I know when I read a report, I know what that inspector's background is.
Right.
He's going to, if he's a mason, he's going to start telling me about chimneys and foundation and brickwork and so forth. So, that part of it, yeah.
Is there anything that sticks out in your mind as far as something funny or comical that's happened through the years that gave you a laugh?
That's what I want to know.
There's been a couple, but the one I could really relate to, this particular realtor was a large home in Saddle River. It was vacant for quite some time. And I said, I'm going to start running all the fixtures. Then I'm going to go back down in the basement and make sure there's no leaks. Just, there shouldn't be. The house has been, well maintained. I know the owner and so forth and so on. So make a long story short.
That's usually when it starts. Something's about to happen.
We ran the whirlpool tub, and all of a sudden I hear a scream downstairs. I don't know if somebody fell or what it was. I come running downstairs. There's water cascading from the top floor master bathroom into the kitchen. Now everybody's hustling, trying to find the main water shut off to stop it. But meanwhile, that tub was filled up.
Filled, yeah.
The ceiling collapsed, and I mean, it was really pretty bad. And when I see this particular realtor, we always talk about that incident. So now I always tell my guys, do not leave the bathroom with the tub running until in fact, that it's draining properly.
I mean, clearly that's unforeseen. You can't foresee.
Yeah,
that.
No. Again, that's a latent
I
defect.
have had inspectors who, for example, turned ovens on, and there was plastic. People use them as storage sometimes.
Sure.
So there's plastic spoons, bowls, and all of a sudden you smell,
especially new construction,
burning. Exactly.
I've
also had inspectors run dishwashers and leave the dishwasher on, and it wasn't sealed properly or hooked up properly. That was new construction, and the entire floor. Yeah. We got a call later. You shouldn't have left the dishwasher. Yeah, you think?
Oh yeah. We've had some really. I could go on with war stories. That another one. The situation was in a larger home. Parents left on vacation. The teenagers had a party there from Friday to Monday, and it was in August. Water was coming through the ceiling from the condensate drain in the air conditioning units in the attic. Just ran for 3-4 days.
Oh.
Bottom line is it lifted up the Brazilian floor in the dining room. That's how much water was there. I don't even know if those kids are alive today. If they're my kids, I don't know what I would have done. But there's a lot of, and it was just lack of maintenance. It was a clogged condensate drain, and that's what it created.
Right.
Walking into a situation, you don't know what's, like this, what Steve said, there's something in the oven. You don't think to check that, but you have to really be on your game all the time.
Yes.
When I'm relating the inspection to the relationship with the realtor, is there something you like, for example, when we do an inspection, I kind of, as you know, leave you to do the inspection.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, and that's why you're there. I feel as though I'm good on the real estate transaction side, and your expertise and job is to do the home inspection. Do you feel sometimes that agents and or sellers overstep a little bit and get into the picture when maybe they shouldn't? In other words, I feel as though if my interest, which it is aligned with yours, which it is, that we're repping the client's best interest. The best thing I can do oftentimes during the inspection is be physically there to support them, but allow you to do your job because you're the expert, not me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's been quite a few times where the realtors would, I want to say they're on top of you, but literally quite.
I've seen it. That's why I'm asking.
Quite involved.
It kind of always means it's not me doing the inspection.
Well, it creates an issue with the potential buyer because they want to feel comfortable in asking me questions and for me to answer them properly without feeling intimidated by the realtor. Mm-hmm. But it gets difficult. Like if there's open wiring in the wall, I'd say, this is a safety area that needs to be addressed. And the realtor may jump in and say, well, all you need is a junction box. Well, okay, that's fine.
Right.
Now let's open up the service panel and see what's going on there. And I find burnt, crisp wires inside. Well, that could just be replaced. So the dialogue that they have with us should really be in the background.
That's what I was just going to say. I feel like you're the forefront. They're kind of in the middle, and we create a sandwich where I'm on the back end. So if they want to bounce things off me, I have more experience most likely than the average buyer because I do this constantly for 20 years, but certainly don't have the experience you do. So I could be there's a secondary source, but that's exactly what that should be, is a secondary source. You should be the primary source, and then if they want a second opinion, they can ask me, but I'll be at the background.
And getting back to what we were saying with the discomfort with the buyers, a lot of them will just say, "Look, can we just go outside after we're done and summarize with me? I feel a little bit more comfortable not speaking in front of a realtor." And it's you really got to be careful how you portray yourself and the words you use, because you got the homeowner if they're there, the
Yep.
listing agent, the buyer's agent, and the buyer.
Right.
So you got an audience, and sometimes
Yeah.
you get Uncle Joe there, who is a carpenter or a plumber, and he's going to be butting in as well. So it does make it a little bit more challenging,
Right.
But if you got the experience, you know how to handle it. And if you're a plumber or electrician and you want to accompany your family member on the inspect, that's fine. But just let me do my thing.
So that
And that's
that-
kind of
that-
why I asked it, is because I've seen you in all those situations, but the end result is always the same. You're still able to do the inspection, you're still come up with a report, and you're still able to explain it to the buyer
Yeah.
directly, whether that's
That-
stepping outside or waiting a moment longer or excusing yourself or doing it later. You're always able to get that accomplished, but it's a matter of navigating those
That-
waters.
I mean, that goes right along with something else I was going to bring up and that's like the biggest real estate joke or meme is the buyer's dad. I mean, how do you handle those? Because they get right in there.
Oh,
and
yeah. I've had it where I've had the newlywed couple, they're buying their first home, they're nervous as can be, and I would have the mother, the father, then the in-laws, mother and father. So now these two are
going at
going at it,
And it's all out of love.
oh yeah, it
They're
is.
doing it because they care about
exactly.
the children in this particular case.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just
But
the end result may not be the one that they were
the buyer
looking
wants.
for.
But then there was quite a few instances where the father, he would flex his muscles,
Yep.
and the father-in-law would flex his muscles.
Yep.
And I would just go on and do my thing and explain to the couple, what's going on. And at the end, it's gratifying when they'll come over and say, "You did a great job. Shake my hand. I thank you
Yeah,
for what
again,
you
the
did,"
end result with my experience is it's always is the same, in the sense that you've done the entire inspection, you've done it very thoroughly, and you're able to get that reported and discuss that with the client, the buyer, the prospective buyer, and in a very efficient and professional way. So I think that's a testament to your professionalism.
Yeah,
for sure.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we try. It becomes challenging but rewarding. Hopefully, you're not going to please everybody.
No, 100%.
Somebody's always going to end up with the short end of the stick, and it's usually the seller.
Yeah,
And that's where we get into pre-listing inspections.
right. Which we started off with, and I think we kind of got away from those for a while because buyers had to give away their firstborn child for a while.
But the market,
the
that's another thing. The market's shifting now, right?
Yeah.
It's shifting very quickly. We're seeing it on our end, especially in the higher end, and that will trickle down. Do you see the home inspection process changing a bit back to the kind of the norm of what it was before versus people waiving all these items?
To me, that's total suicide. When I hear, look at my attorney advised me to do the inspection. However, the realtor says we're going to waive the inspection to get the deal. Well, if you buy a used car and you're driving it and all of a sudden it breaks down, who are you going to turn to?
Right.
You really, again, it's a very expensive investment. It's probably one of the largest especially the first time home buyers. You've got to go through it. You got to.
Well, what we would do a lot on our side is we would
Mhm.
say, we're not going to, we don't have the right to ask for anything. And the language that was put in the rider was, we don't have the right to ask for anything, but we can still terminate.
Right.
So ultimately, in the end, if the buyer thinks there's too much going on, negative things, issues that are either not correctable easily or not correctable at all, or just too expensive, they can back out of the deal. Or even though we said we don't have the right to request a repair, right, we could say we're terminating.
Right.
But in lieu of this credit, we could possibly.
Well, that's a good point, because the standard question that we would get at the end of the inspection: should I buy the house?
Mm-hmm.
No,
you always get that.
I say, it's not really my position.
Yeah,
I
how do you
can't tell you
answer
to. But I don't know what your budget is as compared to mine. And I always explain to the client, or try to give them a little bit of insight. If you're going to be looking for money off on the house, you want to get a credit. You don't want the seller's Uncle Joe there with duct tape and glue fixing the plumbing leak. You want to get the credit. You hire your own your own contractor. And this way you have a little bit of recourse if something does happen. You can call a contractor, say, look, you fixed the sink trap and it's still leaking. Once you close, that's it.
Yeah. Once you close, it's theirs.
Right.
And that's a different story.
Right.
there be anything that you would advise a buyer, specifically maybe a first-time buyer or someone that's buying a larger home than they were accustomed to with the previous property, that they do as far as maintenance? I mean, I know there's a long list, and I've seen you kind of advise at the end and be available for questions later. But are there a standard few things you would really highly recommend a buyer do as they get into a property and into a home, single-family home specifically, that they should be aware of and do either, weekly, monthly, annually?
Yeah, especially for first-time home buyers, they have no clue as to where anything is. For checking the furnace, the air conditioning, utilize the same company that's been servicing the house now,
Right.
from the seller. This way, they're familiarized with the equipment. They're on a set schedule, and once you get acclimated to the home, you know where things are. Now you can go shop out your own contractors.
Makes sense.
But at least it gives you a path that you move in. I mean, the last thing you want is leaks and electrical problems and no heat. You're interested in decorations and so forth. Get through the first year. Then I would certainly recommend to get a preventive maintenance.
Yeah, that's a great point. We did a pool inspection, and I recommended to the buyers, we discussed looking into it further. And one of the points that we brought up was to reach out to the current company that's doing the maintenance, because the seller can say all they want, they never had a problem, but once you reach out to them, they're going to tell you, actually, this is what we did to the pool, and if there was a problem, you're going to know about it.
Yeah, I think that's real important. The same thing going back to a seller's disclosure. I have never seen a seller's disclosure that was accurate.
Yeah.
There's 50 questions. There's 45 of them that say, I don't know. So
Yeah.
it really
Unknown.
Yeah, unknown. Right. So
I do tell clients when they are looking at those, however, you can sometimes tell how intimately familiar the seller is with the home, because there's a lot more detail in it. And I typically like to see that, because I tell my client, like, this to me seems like, although, as to your point, they're never 100% accurate, but someone who's filling it out properly, you can have more comfort that they are keeping maintaining the home to a certain level, because they know what's going on with the furnace. They know the age of the roof. They know the age of the
Well, and
hot
our
water
protocol at
heater.
our team, when we get those disclosures, is we kind of keep it as a template, and then we let them know you're going to do your own inspection. So just because they said there wasn't any leaks,
right.
we don't know that.
Right.
If they say there was a leak, we know there was at least one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it corrected? Is it, and that's where you'll come in.
Yeah.
Listen, I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. I appreciate you coming in.
That was my
I'm not
pleasure.
sure if Alfredo has any other questions. I think you've answered
Yeah,
everything.
you covered everything. That's great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Really
having me.
appreciate it. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Sure.